Well, hiya, BookTube. Bill Ruttenberg here with the Ruttenberg Library. I wanted to come to you today with a mail haul. I'm actually going to have two different mail hauls, and both of them are from Boston, from the Brattle. So everybody out there knows who these books were actually from. Thank you to Steve Donahue, who sent me some Civil War stuff while he was going through the stacks there at the Brattle. And so I wanted to say thank you to him and then show you what he sent me. But first, before I do that, I want to show you in these next two videos that I'm going to put up with mail hauls. I'm going to put in one book each of books that I found when I was at Barnes & Noble. And so I'm going to start with that one, and then I'll go to the four books that he sent me. So, as many of you know, I did recently in this last year or so dip my toe into science fiction, and I started with The Time Machine by H.G. Wells last year, and then recently I read The Island of Dr. Moreau, and I enjoyed probably The Time Machine more than The Island of Dr. Moreau, but The Island of Dr. Moreau wasn't bad. But anyway, I wanted to continue to try to, expand my horizons. And so when we were at Barnes & Noble, my family, I went into the science fiction section, went to the W's, and found H.G. Wells's The Invisible Man. And I really love that cover. They've actually got several of his titles, or a handful of his titles anyway, with this same sort of cover design. This is from Vintage Books. And I think maybe eventually I will pick up a couple of the other ones. I've got them, and I'll just, maybe donate the ones I've got. And then they will all be matching. It'll look pretty sharp on the shelf. But anyway, this is The Invisible Man. Like I said, from H.G. Wells, from Vintage Books, Vintage Classics. Let's see, and this was originally, the original copyright was 1897, but this printing, of course, is not 1897. It is 2018, and like I said, I think it's pretty sharp, and I really like it. Let me read you the back cover if you're not familiar with The Invisible Man. So, back cover says, "The Invisible Man blends comedy and tragedy in its story of a scientist who discovers a way to make himself invisible. His inability to reverse the process leads to a radical disconnection from society and eventually from his own sanity. Arriving in a town where no one knows him, disguised in bandages and dark glasses, the Invisible Man is driven to violent and criminal extremes before his secret is revealed. This prescient parable of the dark side of scientific progress demonstrates H.G. Wells's signature gift for dramatizing humanity's grandest possibilities and darkest fears." And that has been what his previous two books were about, was the good and evil of society. But anyway, really glad to have that. I'm gonna probably try to get this read before school starts. That is on the agenda anyway. So now we get to the books that were sent from the Brattle. These were from Steve Donahue, and like I said, they come from the Brattle. I did not know they were coming. It was a really neat surprise to open up the back door, check the mailbox, and lo and behold, almost trip over the box of books. So this was from last week. I probably should have done this haul earlier in the week, but I already had videos all scheduled and everything. So this one was from last week, about a week ago. This first book is Before Antietam, The Battle for South Mountain by John Michael Priest, and it has a foreword by Edwin C. Beers. And you'll see the wraparound cover there, kind of neat. This is, let's see, from 1992, and it is a White Mane Publishing Company Incorporated. And it's out of Shippensburg, Pennsylvania. So anyway, this is nice to have, and all of these books that I'm going to show in this video and then in the next mail haul video, they are about individual battles in the Civil War, and I didn't have any books on any of these individual battles, with the exception of one book in the other haul but I didn't have the book that he sent me, so that's all right. But these are all, this is all fresh stuff for me, so I'm real excited. So reading the back cover to you, it says, John Michael Priest, in his Antietam, The Soldier's Battle, captured and fired the enthusiasm of the reader with his moving story of the combat experiences of junior officers in the rank and file and their thoughts on that terrible day in September 1862. When the sun seemed to stand still, he did this insofar as possible by allowing soldiers in blue and gray, all long dead, to tell their stories through letters, diaries, newspaper articles, etc. Priest has a talent for winnowing the grain from the chaff and weaving it together to enable his readers to better know and appreciate the hell through which these soldiers passed. He sees the Civil War soldiers much as Ernie Pyle saw the GIs of World War II. Too bad that John Michael Priest did not personally know any of those people and their experiences that he describes so vividly. John Michael Priest looks back in before Antietam, the Battle for South Mountain. His focus is again on the soldiers of the Army of the Potomac and the Army of Northern Virginia in the hectic days immediately before Antietam. Those were heady days for General Lee and his lean and hungry veterans who had crossed the Potomac, carried the war into Maryland. To counter the invasion and turn back his threat to the nation's capital, Union columns, again led by General McClellan, took to the field. A crisis in the war was at hand, not only in Maryland, but everywhere along the 1,000-mile frontier from the Chesapeake to the Indian Territory. The forces of the Confederacy were in ascendance. Mr. Priest employs the research and writing skills that honed in Soldier's Battle, earned the plaudits of reviewers to detail the troops' marches, bivouacs, and skirmishes during the critical days following Lee's September 4th through the 7th crossing of the Potomac and culminating in the Sunday, September 14th fighting for the South Mountain Gaps. The story is moving and dramatic and sets the stage for Antietam, the South's true high watermark. So it is on to South Mountain. And so really looking forward to that. Antietam is one of those battlefields I really wish I would have visited when I was out in Pennsylvania several years ago visiting Gettysburg. My wife and I were out there, and I gotta, you gotta compromise with the family when you're on vacation, and we did like 3 days at Gettysburg. And so when I wanted to, I felt guilty of asking, hey, let's go on down to Antietam. But now I look back and think, well, maybe I should have, but that's all right. I'm going to look forward to reading this. So the next one that he sent me is called If It Takes All Summer, the Battle of Spotsylvania by William D. Matter. And a little bit older book. Oh, sorry about the shine. Got a nice cover, or a plastic cover on it to protect it. This is from the University of North Carolina Press out of Chapel Hill in London, and it's from 1988. Let's see here. I was going to read the back cover, but those will not help us. So let's read the inside cover, inside flap of the book. All right, so, and it says it's the winner of the Richard Barksdale Harwell Book Award and the Atlanta Civil War, from the Atlanta Civil War Roundtable. The termination of the war and the fate of the Union hung in the balance in May of 1864 as Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia and Ulysses S. Grant's Army of the Potomac clashed in the Virginia countryside. First in the Battle of the Wilderness, where the Federal Army sustained greater losses than at Chancellorsville, and then further south in the vicinity of Spotsylvania Courthouse, where Grant sought to cut Lee's troops off from the Confederate capital of Richmond. If It Takes All Summer is the first book-length examination of the pivotal Spotsylvania campaign of the 7th through the 21st of May. Drawing on extensive research and manuscript collections across the country and an exhaustive reading of the available literature, William Matter sets the strategic stage for the campaign before turning to a detailed description of tactical movements. He offers abundant fresh material on the race from the wilderness to Spotsylvania, the role of the Federal and Confederate cavalry, Emory Upton's brilliantly conceived Union assault on the 10th of May, and the bitter clash on 19th of May at the Harris Farm. Throughout the book, Matter assesses each side's successes, failures, and lost opportunities, and sketches portraits of the principal commanders. The centerpiece of the narrative is a meticulous and dramatic treatment of the horrific encounter in the salient that formed the Confederate center on the 12th of May. There, the campaign reached its crisis, as soldiers waged perhaps the longest and most desperate fight of the entire war for possession of the bloody angle. A fight so savage that trees were literally shot to pieces by musket fire. Matter's sure command of a mass of often conflicting testimony enables him to present by far the clearest account to date of this immensely complex phase of the battle. Rigorously researched, effectively presented, and well supported by maps, If It Takes All Summer is a model tactical study that accords long overdue attention to the Spotsylvania campaign. It will quickly take its place in the front rank of military studies of the Civil War. William D. Matter is a graduate of Pennsylvania State University, is a retired U.S. Air Force pilot. He lives in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So I look forward to that. This is actually, I'm reading the biography on Grant by Ron Chernow, and this is exactly where I'm at in that biography. So that'll be good to supplement reading that biography with. The next one is another battle here. It's Fredericksburg by George C. Rabel. There's that, and this comes from the University of North Carolina Press out of Chapel Hill in London. And if you're not familiar with the University of North Carolina Press, they put out a ton of Civil War books. If you're looking for a university press to find some Civil War stuff, they are one of the premier university presses out there. Go check them out. This book is from 2002. And let's go ahead and read the inside flap of this one. All right, so during the Battle of Gettysburg, as Union troops along Cemetery Ridge rebuffed Pickett's charge, they were heard to shout, "Give them Fredericksburg!" Their cries reverberated from a clash that, although fought some 6 months earlier, clearly loomed large in the minds of Civil War soldiers. Fought on December 13th, 1862, the Battle of Fredericksburg ended in a stunning defeat for the Union. Confederate General Robert E. Lee suffered roughly 5,000 casualties, but inflicted more than twice that many losses, nearly 13,000, on his opponent, General Ambrose Burnside. As news of the Union loss traveled north, it spread a wave of public despair that extended all the way to President Lincoln. In the beleaguered Confederacy, the Southern victory bolstered flagging hopes as Lee and his men began to take on an aura of invincibility. George Rabel offers a gripping account of the Battle of Fredericksburg and places the campaign within its broader political, social, and military context. Blending battlefield and home front history, he not only addresses questions of strategy and tactics, but also explores material conditions in camp, the rhymes and disruptions of military life, rhythms and disruptions of military life, and soldiers' enduring connections to their families and homes. Rabel traces the impact of the battle well beyond the end of the fighting, offering a sense of how the horrific carnage haunted survivors, both civilian and military, on both sides. As the campaign grew more distant, the raw emotion that immediately followed the fighting was transformed into a sort of symbolic experience. And for the Union, morale would never be as low as after Fredericksburg. For the Confederacy, there would never be as great a sense of triumph. For both sides, Rabel says Fredericksburg came to represent the demon of the Civil War. All right, so looking forward to that. Nice thick book. It's a chunky monkey, good sized book. It is. Let's see. It runs in at 671 pages, so that's nice and thick. All of these books, all three of these first books that I showed you on the Civil War were nice thick books. Now this next one is called Civil War Command and Strategy: The Process of Victory and Defeat by Archer Jones. Now, this is a little bit thinner volume, but that's okay. I'm not complaining any at all. But when you compare it to these other ones, not quite as thick. But this is from the Free Press, and it is a 1992 book. Main selection of the History Book Club. All right, so go ahead and read you this one and wrap this first part of the mail haul up. So in this nuts and bolts comparative history of Union and Confederate command and strategy, the eminent prize-winning historian Archer Jones shows us how the Civil War was actually conducted. Looking at decision-making at the highest levels, from mobilization and organization to planning and operation, Jones argues that Presidents Lincoln and Davis and most of their senior generals brought to the context of the Civil War a broad grasp of established military strategy and its historical applications, as well as the ability to make significant strategic innovations. In spite of superior numbers, the Union advantage was greatly diminished by the extent of Southern territory, the intrinsic superiority of the defense over the offense, and the problems of supplying armies over long distances. Northern industrial dominance also proved almost useless in a war which depended less on complex weaponry and ammunition than on the man with the rifle. The two sides were, in fact, almost evenly matched. As a result of this parity, strategy and command were the critical elements determining the course and outcome of the war. In a unique thematic approach to the military history of the war, Archer Jones organizes his chapters around distinct strategic concepts, which he delineates and traces through the various phases of the conflict. He reveals how such ideas as the turning movement, the concentration of force in space and time, and diversity of raids shaped the performance of the North and the South and provided military means to advance their political ends. Jones emphasizes the role of maneuvers as well as the significance of battles in explaining how military leaders like Grant and Lee worked in remarkable harmony with the political objectives of Presidents Lincoln and Davis, who had one eye on the battlefields and another eye on the upcoming elections. Closely analyzing and evaluating the commands of these exemplary leaders, the author demonstrates that the war was neither total nor modern, limited nor classical, but rather a multifaceted blend of traditional warfare with early influences of the industrial age. With 40 pages of diagrams and to complement his fresh revisionist analysis, Jones offers unadulterated military history that gets to the root of how the Civil War was won and lost. So very excited to read about that. This will go along well with, I read a book by John Keegan on the Civil War, and it sounds a lot like what he did when he was analyzing the war and looking at different maneuvers and geography and just stuff like that. So that is the end of this first mail haul. So that gives us 4 books that came in the mail and then one that I added in from Barnes & Noble that I purchased. So this is Civil War, Command and Strategy by Archer Jones, Fredericksburg by George Rabel, If It Takes All Summer, The Battle of Spotsylvania by William D. Matter, Before Antietam, The Battle for South Mountain by John Michael Priest, and then the one that I bought at Barnes & Noble, The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. So 4 pieces of Civil War and then some science fiction. So there you go, BookTube. Hope you enjoyed this. I hope maybe this gives you some more ideas for your reading with the Civil War. So I thank you for watching, and I hope everyone's having a great day. The sun is shining here. It's a bit on the warm side, so I'm inside, needless to say, but the sun is shining, and it could be worse. So anyway, I hope you're getting some reading in, and until next time, happy reading.